one of the last components of the upper left-hand quadrant of our A3 in the plan phase is figuring out who should be in our team. There's a tool for this. Obviously you can think through in more of an informal way who touches the process, what customers are receiving the outputs of the process, and typically those are the people that you want represented on the team. A more formal way of going through that exercise to ensure that nothing's being missed is by using a tool that we call a SIPOC diagram. SIPOC is a high-level process sequence of suppliers, inputs, process, outputs, and customers. So it does a lot of different things in addition to helping you identify team members. It also helps you to identify process boundaries. Oftentimes we bite off more than we can chew, and putting these process steps on a SIPOC allows us almost to instantly see if the project is bigger in scope than it should be for it to be successfully completed. It allows us to see inputs into the process that we need for it to function, deliverables or outputs that go to our customers, and of course suppliers and customers of our process. And these are the people that we want to make sure are either on the team or represented in some way. So we start with our process, and we list our first step and our last, and then 4 to 8 steps in between. Right, so we're listing really 4 to 8 high-level process steps. And then we start building from the outside in. Starting with the first step, we go through a series of understanding who is the supplier of information, data, equipment, knowledge into that process, who's the customer that receives the output from that step, what is the supplier inputting, and what is the customer receiving. All right, so we do that for each step of the high-level process steps that we've listed in the middle. All right, this is an example of a human resources recruitment project that was done a few years ago. And so the team decided to scope the process between the job description being submitted and activated, so that's the first step in the scope, and then the last step was the new hire being onboarded. Right, so that was the focus of the project. You can see where this could rapidly creep out of control. There are many, many steps involved prior to the job description being submitted. There are a lot of compensation-related steps. So for the purposes of this initiative, those were all considered out of scope. All right, so let's walk through the first step. Job description submitted and activated. Our suppliers are the hiring manager and recruiter. Our customers we haven't gotten to yet. That's up to us to think about in this exercise. But the hiring manager is supplying the job posting. The recruiter and the hiring manager together are solidifying the salary. Right, so those are 2 critical inputs that are needed before a job description can be fully activated. Once that process step is completed, the output is an official JHU Jobs, or now SuccessFactors, posting. Who is the customer of that? The hiring manager is the primary customer of that activated job posting. Let's move to the next step, applications screened. So who is supplying information so that applications can be screened? I think we're missing one. I think the hiring manager has to supply qualifications, minimum qualifications, preferred qualifications, and then as the applications are coming in, it's the recruiter that's actually using these inputs to perform that function. The screened applications are going to the hiring manager again as a customer, and the output, the main output, is a list of qualified candidates. All right, if we continue to work our way through, we have the next step, which is interviews conducted. So here, the main supplier of that process step, or driver of that step, is the hiring manager. What are the critical inputs needed here? Well, you need behavioral interview questions, the candidate or the applicant themselves, potentially other people that are participating on a panel, right? There are lots of critical inputs that go into this step, and the output of interviews being conducted are potentially an offer decision, a salary, and then a start date. And who does that go to? It goes to the new hire and the HR specialist, who then takes that information into the next step for new hire processing. So you have the gist, I think, of how this works. Let's go ahead and fill in some of the other empty boxes. All right, the supplier for new hire processing is the new hire themselves. They're having to provide personal information so that background and education checks can be done, reference checks, and the HR specialist. So that is the employee who typically is responsible for this part of the hiring process. Our last step in this project was new hire onboarding. Right, so the output of that was the My Learning record, which indicates that all of the new hire training that's required has been done, and an ISR, internal service request, so that new hire is set up in SAP payroll. Let's pause here so that you can take a few minutes to think about or write down, based on that SIPOC exercise, the roles of the individuals who should be represented in an HR recruitment process improvement team. All right, here's my list. New hires, at least one, for a customer perspective. Hiring managers, also for a customer perspective. Recruiters, they are staff that touch the process every day. Talent acquisition manager, they supervise the recruiters. We'll talk about official roles of a Lean Six Sigma project team. The talent acquisition manager in this case would assume the role of the process owner. JHU leadership will champion the project, but they wouldn't be part of the functioning work group. So is there any role that we're missing from my list? In looking at it, there's another critical staff role that touches many steps of this process, and that is the HR specialist that handles a lot of the employment verification and onboarding practices after an offer is made.